How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. It's an absolute pleasure to have this guy on the podcast again. I've spoken to him twice before in episodes 82 and 124. I've spoken to him outside of the podcast as well. He's a guy I've got a massive amount of respect for, and I've learned a lot from every time I've spoken to him. Today, I am joined by the one and only Joel Proskewitz. How are you doing?
Steve, thank you very much. I'm well. And all of that back at you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here on the Strength Chat podcast for my third time. Obviously, again, what I'm saying, people are interested in my story. So it's an absolute honor to be back. And I hope you're well. And thanks very much for having me back on.
No worries at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on, and I'm sure we'll get into a couple of topics of what's been going on, of what the episode's going to be about. But since we last spoke, a year ago, obviously with COVID, with everything else that's been going on, what's been happening in your world? How's everything been happening with you?
Steve, we spoke probably just after lockdown was brought in here in the UK, and everything was the world had changed, but in my world things had changed quite drastically. I don't know whether some of your viewers will know or not know, but I actually went in for spine surgery in June of 2020. And the journey has been phenomenally complex, a lot more complex and complicated than both myself and my surgeon and my team actually had assumed. So the last year has really been a roller coaster ride for me. I'm now sort of coming to the tail end of it. And I'm hoping that my story will empower many people out there that are currently dealing with back pain. Because in every element of adversity, Steve, you need to find the silver lining. Because as warriors, I'm hoping I can term myself that. That's what we do. And so it has been quite a journey that I think as a clinician, funny enough, dealing in low back pain, you never really get to understand the intricacies of a patient's journey or pain presentation until you become the patient. Yeah. And so it's been quite a year, my friend. It's been quite a year. So we'll get into the details.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned that point, because I know in the previous times we've spoken, the last time we spoke about was everything matters. It isn't just a case of that one singular event that causes back pain. It's a build up of everything. And especially when I saw you putting things out from there, I've had conversations with clients, and I think we actually even had that discussion about, with lockdown, a lot of people working from home, posture and sitting down a lot more, that it has an influence on back pain and everything. And when we've spoken about that, I think sometimes people often forget, as a lower back specialist, the courses that you run, the people that you work with, Joel will never have lower back pain. He's a lower back specialist. It's the same as when people are looking at coaches or PTs. Oh, their food must be awesome all the time. Whereas actually, it's some of those things where things will happen, and then going on the flip side of it, you can learn a lot more from there. So probably the first question, because I remember having a phone call conversation with you once you'd had your surgery, and we ended up releasing the podcast. From sort of like diagnosis to the operations that you had, what was that journey? And when we're speaking about everything matters, what was the build up from that, and some of the causes?
Sure, Steve, I'll contextualize everything, but what you just said is very important. People look at me and think, oh, well, I could never have low back pain. But every single human is fallible and vulnerable. We are skin, bone, muscle, and fascia, and things break. It's really how we look at things and how we overcome things that define us as human beings. So my journey started many years ago, and with regards to my back pain, not me being a low back specialist, but I had picked up a very specific injury in my younger years called a spondylolisthesis. It's a really big, really tongue-twisting word that a lot of people don't quite understand what it is. And a spondylolisthesis, quite simply, is a very distinct fracture of particular bones in the spine, and it causes one of the vertebrae to actually flip forward over another one. I'll use my model to actually illustrate the point. But if this is a model of a sacrum and the two lowest lumbar vertebrae, which is L4 and L5. Now, I had a fracture of these bones right over here called the pars interarticularis. So I had a fracture there and a fracture right over there, and it causes the L5 vertebra, which is this vertebra here, to actually slip forward over the sacrum. Now, many people can go undiagnosed with a spondylolisthesis and live a very, very functional, non-painful life. Unfortunately, in my case, I had fractured the pars in a very particular way. And over time, I knew eventually that I was going to require a surgical procedure, because I had what they called, or what they term in the medical fraternity, an unstable spondylolisthesis. So when I would flex forward in my spine, or if I would extend back, it would actually be a translation of L5 on S1. And that translation was roughly about between 5 to 7 millimeters. And anything over about 3 millimeters is graded as an unstable spine or an unstable segment. Now, I had lived quite happily with the spondylolisthesis for about 20 years. And in actual fact, that's what got me working with Professor Stu McGill. Is I sought out his expertise very, very early on in my diagnosis. And my interaction with him really put me in a very, very good position to understand the spine, understand, certain mechanisms to avoid, so that the spondylolisthesis didn't become a very provocative aspect in my back pain. Unfortunately, and I clearly remember the day, Steve, it was my end of year staff party at Performance RX in 2019. And we were all out for dinner and we were having a good time. We were at a Mexican restaurant in London, and out of the blue, just out of the blue, it hit me like a lightning bolt. I got this bilateral radicular pain down my legs. I was just sitting there and having a drink, and I felt sciatic pain run from my back, through my glutes, through my hamstrings, right down into my heels. And I've never experienced bilateral sciatic pain before. And I realized at that moment that things had started to deteriorate. And the early start of 2020, I was starting to get that sensation on a more regular basis. And I just knew at that stage that the time had come for me to start considering surgical interventions, because my toolbox was decreasing rapidly in the gym. So I couldn't even do my core stability stuff anymore without flare-ups. So, and really, I understand the modifications and the ability to strip the exercises back. And even with all my knowledge and the ability to strip things, I still wasn't really making progress. And it was in around about May that I made the decision to have a team call between myself, Stu McGill, and my surgeon. And we started to discuss the different options. And then I continued that discussion with my surgeon. And we went through a multitude of different surgical options, the pros, the cons, what can happen. And this surgery, it was supposed to be a 2-phase surgery, Steve. The surgery began on the 15th of June in 2020, with the second surgery occurring a week later on the 22nd of June And unfortunately, there were a multitude of complications. And to no fault of my surgeon, in actual fact, I've praised him publicly on multiple occasions, because if I never had him and I had someone who had been, let's say, a little bit more dismissive, I would have landed up in a far worse position. Right. And anyway, so it's now culminated in me having my 7th and hopefully my final surgery, which took place exactly 3 weeks ago. So that's where I am.
Yeah, it's when we talk about that, and I know we were chatting a little bit before we started recording, and it wasn't sort of like small surgery, that you were having. I know you showed a little bit of a demo before we started recording there. Probably a couple of things just chatting from there, because I know for myself, and maybe people listening as well, having had that initial injury, and then you mentioned there 20 years training, feeling fine, and then something is going out for a meal and then feeling pain from there. When the clients putting the coach's hat on rather than the sort of the patient's hat on from there, how have you spoken with people in terms of, because one of the phrases that you put there was, you've got that knowledge base of the tools in your toolkit and you've used them, and they were slowly starting to run out, and it got to a point where the options there were surgery. Is that how you've dealt with clients as well? And if people have lower back pain, that first and foremost we want to be using those tools that we've got, and there is a strong chance that we can last a long time without having that option of going for surgery straight away, because sometimes it is a case of sometimes think, oh, I need to go and get this fixed straight away, whereas actually for 20 years training and everything that you've done, you've been able to do.
Steve, that's a good question. And, again, just to contextualize everything, because, again, with the advent of social media, there's many people out there and well-intentioned people giving out advice for back pain. And as I'm sure you already know, I'm very, very non-prescriptive in anything that I do on social media. It's because I deal with a very, very particular demographic of back pain patients. I really get to deal mostly, or I would say 95% of my practice, I get to deal with some phenomenally disabled individuals. And it's really, now, it's not, the onus is not upon me to determine as to whether that particular individual needs to have surgery or not. That is a decision between them and their medical doctor and or surgeon. But a lot of people do come to me and they've seen multiple clinicians, they've had their presentation that has progressively gotten worse over the, let's say, the last 3 or 4 months, to a point of where they're a lot more dysfunctional. And they come and see me to determine if there's a conservative intervention that can assist them that they haven't tried before they decide to go down the medical route of a surgical intervention. And what I do is, once I've done my assessment, we have a very, and I'm going to use this word extremely strongly, we have a very adult conversation. And I run through everything with them. I don't create fear. I shoot straight from my hip. And I tell them, this is your MRI, this is your presentation, this is the outcome of my assessment, and I wasn't able to reduce your pain, right? And if I'm not able to reduce your pain, my suggestion to you is to now go have a conversation with your surgeon, and most of the time I join that conversation via Zoom, and we have a 3-way conversation, because the surgeons whom I work with are very open to listening to my biomechanical assessment outcomes. So I can then tell them what I found objectively in the assessment. They can then look at the MRIs and we look at them together, and we can all make a very informed decision. And at the end of the day, it's the patient's decision. It's not mine, it's not the surgeon's, but at least the patient, I would say that they are well more informed as to how about going forward. And that's the key, Steve, because again, if you look at a lot of patients that come to see me, it's a very common theme. they say, Joel, I don't quite know what's happening. No one's quite explained what's going on. No one's really explained my MRIs to me. And again, I'm always going to refer back to social media because it's such a powerful platform these days. You've got a lot of people that have extremely strong opinions about MRIs, and you shouldn't order MRIs or show MRIs. Now, that doesn't apply to me. It doesn't apply to my clientele, because my clientele come to me with their MRIs and they actually want to have a proper explanation. And I can only assume that the people who are very strong against or publicly against not explaining MRIs to their patients either don't have the skills to properly explain their MRIs, or they don't have the ability to assess the client and then correlate the outcomes of their assessment to the findings of the MRI. But I'm going to go back to my hashtag. For me, everything matters. And it's very, very rare, Steve, if ever, I've had a patient turn around to me and say they don't want me to explain the MRIs to them because it's too fearful for them. They generally will explain the situation. And once they have that information, they turn around and say they now feel a lot of relief, because now they know how to make a proper informed decision as to whether to have surgery or whether to stay on the conservative route.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you mentioned that a couple of times there of, making sure that they've got the right information so they can make an informed decision. And, we've spoken a couple of times about sometimes you can see a snippet of information on social media and, I'll just do this. And then that way, we can just keep on top of those, and that's going to reduce my back pain. And, part of the reason why, setting up this podcast is to learn from more experienced coaches and specialists in their field, so that, when they are going, they get provided medical information, which is then coming over into the practitioner side of the world, that we can blend those things together and give them a little bit more information. Because I know, when you're in that medical environment, it can be quite confusing and not knowing what's going on. And so having that information and being explained, and sometimes, especially with, I can imagine clients who have worked with you for quite a long time, have that relationship with you, and then they get this MRI scan with maybe a doctor that they haven't worked as much with. So putting sort of the patient's or the client's hat on, how did you feel going into that conversation with, Professor Stuart McGill and your surgeon as the patient of, actually these two worlds are blending together, and I've got a really good support system around that, rather than just thinking, right, that's it, you're over to the surgeons now, and the other party's done. How did you feel sort of having that together and having that conversation?
Steve, that's it put me in a very, very comfortable position right now. First and foremost, I've taken it upon myself to research different spinal surgeries very extensively. I think I've said this before in my podcast. It's very rare that I haven't seen a spinal procedure. I've seen everything from fusions to laminectomies to discectomies to endoscopic discectomies. I understand the difference between a neurosurgeon versus an orthopedic surgeon. I think I've seen everything bar the removal of spinal tumors. I've never been privy to that, and because those are quite sensitive cases, specifically with patients, right? And I would have to greatly respect the patient and the surgeon. However, for me, I became a student of the surgery game when I realized that I needed to go for surgery. Because prior to me going for surgery, I knew about, surgical procedures very well, but I now went so deep into understanding the differences between the materials that they would use in a cage versus the biologic materials that they would use for bone grafts, the pros, the cons. What happens if the surgeon goes in via your stomach, right, or the anterior aspect to do the fusion, versus what happens if they go through the back of your spine? What are the pros? What are the cons? So for me, from the time that I had decided to go for surgery to when I actually went for surgery, it was roughly about 5 or 6 weeks. That was the period, Steve. And I recall we had a good summer at that stage in the UK last year. And I recall every single day during COVID, I sat outside in my garden and I must have spent anywhere between 2 to 3 hours every single day for about 5 weeks, reading every single paper and watching every video I could get my hands on with regards to the difference between spinal fusion surgeries. So when it came to time of where I sat down with my surgeon and Stu McGill and we discussed all the different surgeries, I was very, very well healed with regards to my knowledge in the different surgical pros and cons. So my questions to both Stu from a biomechanical perspective and to my surgeon from a surgical perspective allowed me the comfort and the confidence to know that I was in very, very good hands, because my surgeon couldn't pull the wool over my eyes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and so now I'm now being sought out by patients who are going for surgery, who now come and ask me to sit in a conversation with them and their surgeon, where I can now ask certain questions. And then the surgeon understands that, again, they can't really pull the wool over my eyes, so to speak. And at no stage, Steve, am I turning around and saying that my knowledge is superior to a surgeon. There's no ways. Okay, trust me, you don't want me to do surgery on your back. But it's more a question of giving the client or the patient the confidence for me to turn around and say, you know, that surgeon just really, really answered those questions very well. And, you know, I think you would do very well under their care, or consider a second opinion, or whatever it is, you know. But again, the surgeons whom I work with, Steve, they're very, very knowledgeable. They're very open to a whole host of questions, being challenged. They really are supreme surgical masters. And I'm very, very grateful to really be in their inner circle, so to speak.
Yeah, you mentioned there about the from the client's point of view, having confidence, and you said about it going into that session, going into that meeting, feeling comfortable that, you know, if you did have any questions, that they would be able to give you know, good enough answers, and if you challenged them, you know, you felt comfortable with those answers. Because whenever there's a pain or an injury or anything that goes on, I know, you know, that I think the biggest thing is just the fear of, well, is this going to get sorted? You know, am I going to go, and is everything going to go well? And having that confidence and having those fears put to bed a little bit, because I know sometimes, you know, especially when you're looking at studies or videos and everything, you can kind of think of it as, wow, right, this is pretty major stuff. So being able to have that conversation and feel comfortable about it, I think has a big impact. And that kind of goes on to the sort of the next question that I wanted to ask is, when we talk about confidence and fear of injury, and, you know, that nervousness of going into surgery, how did your mindset change throughout the process? You know, from, you know, having that 20 years of you know, being able to train and, you know, having relatively, you know, no issues, to then having that mindset of, right, okay, something needs to happen now, because my toolkit is wearing thin. And then the mindset surrounding having, you know, being thrown a little bit of a curveballs and complications from the first surgery, and then the surgeries that you've had now.
Steve, that evening in 2019, when I experienced the bilateral sciatic pain, my thought process changed there and then. And my thought process went from being a back pain specialist, and I thought to myself, I'm now a back pain patient. So straight away, I took on board the fact that I now may be walking down the path to an eventual surgery. So with that, what I did is I took myself in hand, and I thought, I'm going to become as upskilled as much as I can in understanding what the journey is now as a potential surgical back pain patient. So straight away, my mindset changed. And Steve, it's everyone's mindset is different. That's why there's the biopsychosocial aspect of back pain, right? And why sometimes, or all the time, in actual fact, you need to understand the human being that you are dealing with, and adapt to their character and personality. So with me, I'm pretty much a put your head down type of guy and just get on with it, right? And so I started, it felt as though I was going into war. That's how I approached my pending surgery at the beginning of 2020. I felt like every morning I was putting on my camos and sort of, it's sort of disguising my face and getting ready for war. And I recall the very first surgery, which was on the 15th of June, 2020, when I went in. And that was a surgery where they enter to get your spine through your stomach. So basically, it was a vascular surgeon first who did the first part of the surgery. So they cut your stomach, or they cut your abdominal wall, and then they move the sac that's got all your organs, and the peritoneum, they move that across, and then they remove, orthopedic surgeon removes the disc at L5 and S1, and that's where they put the cage in, and they raise your spine up and they shift your spine back, and they do a whole host of things. And I recall that I wouldn't say I was extremely nervous, but I was anxious.
Yeah.
Right. So because the reason I wasn't nervous is because I know my surgeon very well, and I had done an extreme amount of research. And then when I came out of that operation, I felt really, really good. So a week later, I then had to go back in for the second part of the operation, which is where the surgeon goes through your back, and then they insert pedicle screws, okay, both at L5 and at S1, and then they put rods in, and then they pull my spine back, because remember, my original injury caused my spine to slip forward by about 5 millimeters, which is a significant amount, right? So the second operation was to pull me back and then lock me into a very lordotic, or a very good sagittal plane balanced position. Anyway, it was when I went in for that surgery, I was feeling really good, because I was on a high from my first surgery, right? Yeah. However, it was when I woke up from that second surgery, Steve, that things really went downhill, because unbeknownst to my surgeon and anyone else, I had actually acquired what they call a traction neuropraxia. And a traction neuropraxia is that when he pulled my spine back, the L5, the exiting L5 nerve roots, which come out of the side of the spine, they go through the front of the pelvis, and then they join with other nerves, and they exit through the back of the pelvis and go down the back of the leg. What had happened was, as he pulled my spine back, right, he had stretched those nerves, because the nerves had adapted to a shortened position over the last 20 years. And I then woke up from that surgery, Steve, and I honestly tell you, I don't think I could ever express the magnitude of the pain over a video call. But I woke up, and it wasn't even a 10 out of 10 pain. I would say it must have been about a 15 out of 10. I woke up in recovery. I'd never, ever experienced pain like that in my entire life. That I didn't wake up in recovery and think, oh, my back's sore, my leg's sore. I woke up because I was screaming. Yeah. And then the nurses ran in, my surgeon ran in, and it was like, what the hell's going on? And it took them about 2 hours and 45 minutes to administer enough drugs to take the pain down by about 2 points so that they could get me up to the room. Yeah. I then had, over the next sort of week, I had another 3 surgeries that my surgeon went in through the backside of my spine to make sure that the nerve was completely decompressed, so that there was no compression on the nerve. And once that had been fully decompressed, it was now just, Joel, it's now time, suck it up, and let's see what happens. Right? That's really what it was. So my mindset, Steve, was very, very complex. There were moments that were phenomenally dark, because I was in hospital for 3 weeks during COVID. I couldn't see my family or anything to that degree. And in actual fact, Steve, you know, the people that saw me at my worst were people like the nurses, the catering staff, the cleaning staff. They came into the room when I was literally living the darkest hours of my life, because everything runs through your mind. Should I have done the surgery? Should I have chosen the surgeon? Should I have gone somewhere else? Should I have gone to a different country? And you know, you run these things, and unfortunately, someone who has my experience and knowledge base, you know, you then start to analyze every bit of minutia that you can. You know, what did he say? What was his intention? What did that nurse say? And so those 3 weeks were phenomenally difficult, really difficult. But as I say, in those 3 weeks and being in hospital, that's when I really knew that I was a back pain patient. And for me, I got to a point of where, right, this is it, Joel. This is what you have. This is your new normal. So now deal with it. You can't cry over spilt milk. You can't think back and turn around and say, I should have done this, right? So, you know, Steve, if I didn't shave my hair when I was a youngster, maybe I would have more hair now. Who knows? Okay. So there's no point in crying over spilt milk. And my mind just works that way. I was like, right, this is it. This is what I have to deal with. I have a great surgeon. I've got a great team. I've got guys like Stu McGill and a whole bunch of other people that were on my side. And now let's just do what I need to do. And the thing that really got me though, Steve, was on the 5th surgery, right? Which was the 3rd time that he had gone in post the 2nd surgery, right? So on the 5th surgery, and which was sort of toward the end of June, beginning of July, I was still in hospital. I woke up from that surgery and I had lost the use of my left leg. Oh. And I'd never had that before. So I couldn't flex my foot, because what happens is the L5 nerve root feeds particular muscles down the leg that allow you to both flex your foot and actually flex your big toe. Yeah. And I had lost the ability to flex my foot, and it's commonly known as foot drop. So I'd lost the use of my foot and my toe. So when I was walking in hospital, I was literally dragging my leg. Now, the surgeon said to me, this will pass. He said, but I don't know how long it's going to take. That is not the answer you want to hear. Anyway, it so happened that I was right. This is what I need to deal with, and I will overcome this. I think the reason that I had the ability to overcome it, Steve, is because I knew that my surgeon had done a really good job. He hadn't done a rogue surgery on me, or he hadn't experimented with different types of surgeries or anything to that degree. It just happened to be a risk factor in the surgery. And hey, man, I hit the jackpot. Yeah. So for me, I went through a multitude of different emotions. I went from, dark to hope to a whole bunch of things. And as I got home, because I needed to get out of that hospital, I couldn't stay there. I was there for 3 weeks. And, you become another number by that stage. And because the nurses can't even help you out, the pain is just beyond anything they've ever dealt with, that actually it was quite emotional for the nurses, because there were times that they would come into the room and they would look at me and they would start to cry, right? Because they just didn't know what to do, and they'd run out the room. And I'd obviously never experienced that before, where a nurse came in, cries, and runs out the room, you know. I didn't know that I was that repulsive. Anyway, so I knew that I was on a mission to get myself better. And I got home, and, you know, with the support of my family and my friends and my colleagues, I did really, really well. And unfortunately, I've picked up further complications, and hence why I've had another 2 surgeries. But I'm in a much stronger, better position, Steve.
Yeah. From just what you said there, I remember having a phone call conversation. I think I was in work all the time. I was doing something, and we booked in a call. And when you mentioned about sort of like the painkillers and being in hospital, obviously, first of all, I was like, you know, are you okay, Joel? Is everything all right? And explaining that, then the amount of pain, you know, that going through, having that explanation surrounding it for somebody who is very motivated and, you know, quite a strong person. From what you've spoken about, and you mentioned there about, you know, being motivated. Look, I'm going to get on with it. This is what we're going to go. And when for people listening, or, you know, clients that you've worked with who maybe haven't had as much surgery or anything like that, everything that has happened there, even someone such as strong as yourself, there are times when you can doubt it, and it isn't a case of, you know, we said about it at the start, no one's sort of untouchable or beyond pain or anything like that. And I think it's a human instinct to overthink things. You mentioned there, with your knowledge and experience, what did that nurse say? What did that doctor say? What could I have done from there? Because, you know, it is a human emotion. You know, there are going to be times where when things are challenging. You know, but having that progress and that mentality of, look, you know, there's got to be a way out. There's always got to be, like, it isn't a case of I think we actually spoke about it before, that, you know, if you have lower back pain or an injury or pain in anything, oh well, that's just what it is now. I just have that now. This is what it is. And actually isn't, you know, that's no sort of that's nothing to have there. You know, it needs to be there needs to be a way out and progress and light at the end of the tunnel. And seeing what you've mentioned there and the progress that you've made, you know, it should be motivating. I know I feel motivated from that, you know, the process that you've gone through. And that kind of goes on to, because I remember, obviously, you know, you've tracked some of your rehab over the on social media, and one of the best things that I saw, which, you know, quite a lot of someone commented, why did you have your knee up whilst you were doing a pull up? And you got back to training. It was a case of, wow, this guy's had surgery and he's back doing pull ups. Challenges that it came to, you know, when it's like, right, okay, I've had a surgery, need to get back training, need to do something, you know, to help, you know, with that recovery side of things. But then also, what were the wins and challenges, you know, that you had, you know, with a couple of the setbacks, especially when you know, had to have that surgery again. You obviously mentioned about your foot. How did that influence your mindset, and what were the challenges and wins that you found from, you know, after the surgeries and the training that we had afterwards?
The challenge for me, Steve, was for someone who's been very physically active, literally, you know, my whole life, was to go back to being able to do exercise, but stop very, very short of reaching an empty gas tank, right? In other words, I know that I could have gone back post my surgeries and I could have, you know, handled a 45-minute session. But it was having the discipline to go in there and know, if I could train for 20 minutes, I would only train for 5.
Yeah.
Right? That was very difficult for me, because I don't need the motivation to train. I needed the motivation to protect myself from myself.
Yeah.
So that was a very difficult thing. But the thing that assisted me with that thought process, okay, was the fact that I knew that you can't rush nature. All right. Now, this is not back pain, or I'm not recovering from a disc bulge. I'm recovering from major traumatic surgery. This is what I had is the equivalent to open heart surgery, right? So on that basis, I knew that if I would if I would disrespect nature and the natural healing process, I would always come off second best.
Yeah.
And I wasn't prepared to do that. And I had a conversation with Stu McGill, and these words ring true in my ear, and they will do until the day I die. He said to me, Joel, cool your jets. Okay. I said, all right, Prof. Okay. He said, Jolie, I'm telling you, just cool your jets. That's all I want you to do. And I said, cool. Because I spoke to Stu on a near daily basis, and I was telling him what I was doing. Anyway, so that was the hard part for me, Steve, right? But it was made easier by the fact that I didn't want to disrespect nature. The wins were when I was able to just incrementally add another rep, or go on the treadmill just a little bit longer, or go on the bike just a little bit longer. And you know, if you go back on my Instagram, you'll see how things progressed from month to month. It wasn't a day-to-day progression. It wasn't a week-to-week, but it was month-to-month. So I learned to have patience, Steve. This has taught me, you know, patience, especially now that by February, you know, I was squatting again. I was doing a whole host of things, albeit I wasn't putting, you know, massive load on my back. But unfortunately, then I had a downturn because of the hardware. So the hardware in my back started to cause me troubles. So I then had a surgery in March, and that went unfortunately wrong. And then I've now had to have a surgery again in June, right? And hopefully this is my final and I'm done. So now I'm really back to square one. So everything I had gained from June to February of this year has now literally been wiped off, and I've got to start again. So my journey back into the gym will begin in about 3 weeks' time. And it's going to be, if I can tolerate 5 minutes, I'm going to do 2 minutes. So, and I'll chart that journey and I'll chart that progress again, because I've had feedback from a lot of viewers saying it's been very inspirational and it's been very helpful to them. So, and I'm going to do that. I'll take it upon myself to share my journey, because my goal is to help and inspire people and to spread the knowledge of what I've been privy to. So on that basis, I've got to have the mindset now to start over again, but it's easier for me now because I've been through it already.
Yeah.
And that's the key, is once you go through something and you understand that it's not going to cause you damage, or it's not life-threatening, or it's not a red flag, you come to terms with it and you just deal with it. That's what happens. And, you know, Steve, just if I may, if I can extrapolate a little bit from that and talk about patients that have got back pain. One of the biggest things when people have got back pain and they don't have the knowledge, you know, as a practitioner or someone who specializes in the spine, is it's the fear of the unknown. They don't know what the pain is telling them, right? So they don't know, is the pain telling them that if they do something and it amplifies the pain, are they going to have permanent damage? And again, when you remove that, not by just saying, oh, don't worry about things, just go off and move, which I find a very infantile prescription, right? It's more when you can objectively determine that that pain doesn't equate to permanent damage or more damage, and you release the fear from the patient. They then understand that if they've experienced the pain once and it's not permanently damaging, that if they experience it again, they don't fear as much. And it empowers that person to understand that they can push a little bit further.
But, sorry, go on.
No, and really, so from in my journey as a back pain patient, that's what I got to learn very, very intimately.
Two things that you kind of said there, and we touched on it a little bit before in terms of the fear. And when it first happens, you know, especially in your circumstances, in terms of, you know, the end of the line, if you like, in terms of, right, we're gonna have to have surgery, and then to have, you know, it twice, two blocks of surgeries, right? Okay, so I get a little bit used to that now. You mentioned disc bulges and those sort of things. It happens again, right? Okay, now I have a better understanding of it. I know for me, which started this whole process, I remember hurting my back, reading back mechanics, speaking to yourself, Stuart McGill, and learning as much as you can. It's like, right, okay, so this isn't a case of I'm never gonna, you know, I don't have to stop powerlifting, I don't have to stop competing in strength sports. However, again, what you've mentioned before, everything matters, so we need to be a little bit more conscious of it. And as well, a key thing in there, which, you know, sometimes maybe from a coach's point of view, you said, right, you know, helping, you know, as a coach's starting point, you're there to help the client and get them to where they want to be and support them. But sometimes you think, oh, well, they're progressing, so can we nudge it up a little bit more? Whereas actually patience, I think, is a really undervalued trait that we need, you know, and having those wins of, oh, well, you know, I'm getting to a point month on month, I'm progressing from there, and having those small wins, because even though they may seem small in the grand scheme of things, they're actually quite big, because it's still heading in the right direction. I think sometimes that's where people can, you know, at that end, if it's disc bulges or other things, just having that patience to look. It's a process, it's a journey, and it's gonna, because, you know, the dates that you've mentioned there, from starting in 2019, that's coming up, you know, 2 years, you know, of trying to focus on this. Whereas sometimes it might be, you know, a couple of months for some people. In the grand scheme of things, look, you know, there is going to be an end of the line, but it's just having that patience and progressing through that. Sort of the
Steve, you've made me think of a saying that I stole from a movie. So when after my last surgery, you know, I really didn't want to read anything about back pain or anything like that. So I lay in bed and I watched a little bit of Netflix and the rest of it. And I was watching a movie, and there was a saying that really hit me, and I've written it down. And the saying goes, survival is a journey that never ends. Right? So, you know, someone said to me before I had this last surgery, they said, at my gym, they said, Joel, aren't you just so tired of this? Can't you just wait to get back to normal? And I said to her, I said, you know, I really appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate your kindness and generosity in wishing me back to normal. But I said, that's not correct, because every single day I wake up, whatever I'm presented with, that is my new normal. And I then need to deal with it. Because, Steve, I don't live my life, and I never have lived my life, right, in waiting for something to happen, right? I just make it happen on a day-to-day basis. Maybe it's ignorance. Maybe I'm just not that clever. I don't know. Okay. But for me, all right, I'm not working toward, I'm going to be better in 8 months' time. I don't know what the hell 8 months' time is going to hold for me. Who knows what's going to happen? So for me, okay, when I heard survival is a journey that never ends, that is so true, right? Because every single day for me, I'm presented with a new normal, a new pain, and whatever it is, a new challenge. And I just need to attack that as best as I can. And guess what happens? When you look back and you see you've done that for 6 months, you realize where you started, and you realize now where you are. And that for me has been personally the most empowering realization in my whole journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, taking it, I think sometimes there's a tendency to think, you know, bigger scale, whereas, you know, the conversations I'll have with clients, you're going to get thrown, you know, curveballs. There's going to be things that are going to happen on a day-to-day basis that might, you know, make it a challenge or an obstacle. Or there might be some things where you think today's going really, really well, and you make a little bit more progress from there. But, you know, all those small wins, that they add up. and I think that sometimes, I think people are so focused on the end product or where they're going, that sometimes actually just stepping back and looking how far you've come is sometimes that refreshment, or that refreshing feeling and motivation that you need to be like, do you know what, actually I'm not doing too bad. And when you mentioned there about the times where you in severe pain, where you're feeling down, I think those wins and progressing forward, they make it even better. It's not a case of, at that time, it's not a very nice situation to be in, but there's always something to progress from. You've touched on a couple of times there, about how you've worked with clients, and now obviously knowing different procedures, and speaking with surgeons and everything. Throughout this whole process, from the first surgeries that you've had, the rehab that you've done, and progressing, the curveballs that you've been thrown, how has that influenced your coaching and how you're working with clients, if it has changed at all, whether it be a case of the knowledge that you've gained from the surgeons, and how you can pass on more information to clients, but also we've had this conversation before, and you've mentioned it in this chat today, dealing with the person that's in front of you. How has it influenced your skills of working with people who have back pain and want to get out of pain?
Steve, I'd probably say that in the last year, my skills and my confidence as a low back pain practitioner has increased tenfold. And I'm putting that down to the fact that I became a patient, and I don't recommend specialists to go become patients. That's not what I'm saying. But I used it as an opportunity to upskill myself. I used it as an opportunity to understand and have the empathy required to deal with patients that are truly, truly lost and need direction. And I would honestly say to you that right now, the fact that a patient sits in front of me, and not all of them know my story, right? Because, not everyone is on Instagram or on YouTube. But when I tell them what I've been through, there's a change of atmosphere in my clinic room straight away, because we're now both on the same page. The patient, is not trying to explain something to me that I've never experienced. Steve, I can't account for other practitioners that have had back pain, right? But I would honestly tell you, and I've had this conversation multiple times with Stu, I would honestly tell you that as a back pain practitioner, I personally have experienced every presentation of pain known to man, right? So whether it's bone pain, nerve compression, nerve traction, I've felt peritoneum pain where they've pulled my stomach across. I felt neuropathy. You name it, I felt it. Okay. So what that's done is it's allowed me to fill my toolbox, so that when a patient says to me, let me try and explain this pain to you, I don't think you'll understand. I sort of, well, let me explain. I do understand. And I don't understand it because I've read it in a textbook. I understand it because I know exactly what you're feeling. So what it does is it levels the playing ground. They don't come to me, all right, and they don't feel the stress of really trying to explain something that they don't have the medical terminology to explain to me. And I always say this, maybe one of my strengths, Steve, I don't know, but is to take the complex world of the lumbar spine and make it very simple, because that's just how my head works. Okay, I like to bullet point things. So on that basis, it's given me the empathy, it's given me the skills to truly, truly work with a back pain patient, and also be very, very frank with them. Not everyone is going to get better from just a mechanical conservative intervention. Not everyone needs surgery. And that's the whole thing is I can honestly say it from a position of strength because I've been through it. I'm very, very grateful for what I've gone through in the last year. It's been tough. There's times I've even got videos of my daughter, my 12-year-old daughter trying to help me take 3 or 4 steps up and down my street, and there's many other dark times that I'm not going to disclose here on this conversation, but and where I am now, I'm driving. I went for a 25-minute walk this morning before our podcast, and those are wins for me. And I can relate that to a patient when I say, don't worry if you have a bad day, because so this too shall pass, and there's going to be more good days ahead. So I'm very grateful for what has happened to me, because I've come out of the other side phenomenally empathetic for back pain patients.
I think which is awesome to hear on that, and it kind of goes back to what we were chatting at the start about, that everything that could have happened you've experienced, and it is one of those things of, oh well, how do you come out the end of it? And it is that thing of you will learn from it. There are things on there that it isn't so much that it's we're not going to get better from there, and using it as a positive. And from the coach's side of things, when we're saying a lower back specialist has been through everything from there, I think sometimes when we're working with clients, it can be quite hard to understand. Whereas actually, everything that you've been, you can be that source of information. You can say confidently, exactly like when we were talking about going into that meeting and working with and speaking with surgeons, go into that confidently. And when clients are coming and working with you, know confidently and be comfortable in the fact that I'm in safe hands here, because I know what we're doing. Sometimes that doesn't always happen. Like what you said there. Don't go out and have lower back surgery if if it's not needed. But I think that's a good tool to have. And at the end of the day, we're going to build a relationship with these people, with these clients, and make sure that again, we've touched on it throughout the chat of having that fear. The information, feeling anxious about these things, and sometimes it can be, turn it into a positive. I know it's a phrase that gets thrown around quite a lot, but we've got to use it from that, because if not, again, we've had conversations before of being in pain and having this. It isn't a case of, right, well, that's it now. That's it. It's only dark moments from there. Whereas actually, it's like, right, no, I want to progress from there, and that's where I know for me, especially from speaking to yourself, increase my knowledge base. So it's a case of, look, there are specialists out there that and if you're a coach listening to this and are unsure, there are specialists out there who you can speak to and be like, look, the goal is to help that person. And the more information we put out about that, that's why speaking through this, when there are people sat there who have got lower back pain or are suffering with pain in general, look, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and there is things that you can do.
To interject, Steve, this is a very key thing for me. There's 2 things that I'm going to discuss very, very quickly. And this is a very common term or common statement. I'm assuming that many people know, but never ever give up because you don't know how close you are to succeeding. I think I've said that before. I don't know, right? But that stuck with me all the time. Never, ever give up because you just don't know how close you are to succeeding. You could be giving up And all you needed was just an extra hour or an extra day to have your life changed completely for the better. Also, as a practitioner, I'm going to say this, if there are coaches watching, a very influential book early on in my career, I'm talking 20 years ago, was Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? Now, I know a lot of people don't like the book or it's too complex for them. For me, it really hit home. And one of his rules was that he always said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Now, I never quite got that, right? 20 years ago. I get it now. I sit in that room with that back pain patient, okay? I don't want them to understand me. I seek to understand them first. And if I can understand them, if I can understand what they're going through, because everyone's different. I get phenomenally resilient individuals that are happy to put 200 kilos on their back. I get very, very broken individuals that have had 5 or 6 failed back surgeries, right? So it's got nothing to do with my experience. I need to understand them first. And then having my experience, I can then impart some information onto them, and we can then have a very synergistic relationship in hopefully me guiding them as how best to look after their back pain. And, you know, so those are the two things, man. Don't give up because you don't know how close you are to success, and seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yeah, it was kind of the next thing I was going to ask about take-home points are always risen, but you kind of preempted me there. I think that's a good way to think about it. And you know, the with anything, it can be challenging. And you know, first of all, I'm thanks a lot for sharing, you know, your story, your story there, because I think, you know, whatever. I know obviously we were talking about, you know, lower back pain there and the surgeries that you had, but, you know, whether other people have had long-term pain or injuries or anything, that, you know, not giving up, you know, shouldn't really be an option, you know, there, because, you know, having pain, whether it's shoulder, back or anything, that isn't when we're talking about, because with anything, whether it's training, nutrition, becoming pain-free, corrective exercise, all these sort of things, ultimately it comes down to having, you know, a healthy, happy lifestyle and being able to do the things that you enjoy, you know, being able to play with your daughter, being able to, you know, go out for walks and do all these things. And I think sometimes, you know, especially when we're thinking about, yes, you mentioned there, you've got people who can put 200 kilos on their back. Yes, that's good. But if we can't bend down and tie our shoelaces, you know, what there's no point with it. And then again, you know, it falls back to what you've mentioned before, which is one of those things that, you know, when we've spoken before, everything matters. And probably if I had £1 for every time I've mentioned that into the gym, I'd probably have to give you 50p of it, give you half of that, you know, the way I'm speaking to clients, because from a client's point of view, from a coach's point of view, I think that's really important. And there's so much information there on, you know, you mentioned it, on the mechanical exercises that we can do, and, you know, the training programs and all these sort of things. Whereas actually, you know, it's those things of, I think mindset plays a really good role in that. And, you know, I know we've touched a little bit on the training side of things, of you being able to do squats and pull-ups, but a lot of it is the mindset thing, which I think when it comes to injuries and pain is really is a really tough thing to overcome, because, you know, again, we've touched on it before, that a lot of people can have different personalities and can sometimes find it hard to, you said right at the start, you know, having that warrior mindset, that I think within everybody, it's within them. It's just unleashing that to be like, right, we're not going to give up. We are going to progress forward. And some of that is down to the information, obviously, that we have.
Steve, you know what? Because when I was in hospital last year, I had 3 anaesthetists, right, that were looking after me over that period of the 3 weeks that I was in hospital. And 2 days before I was discharged, right? Which was, I was discharged on the 12th of July, 2020, right? So I went in on the 22nd of June and I came out on the 12th of July. Anyway, 2 days before I was discharged, one of my anesthetists, I was walking up and down my the hospital hallway, well, dragging my leg. I wasn't really walking. And one of the most encouraging things was said to me on that Friday afternoon when I was walking up and down. He came up to me and he said, Joel, he goes, I believe your surgeon is discharging you on Sunday. And I said, yeah, he is. I said, it's been 3 weeks and it's time for me to go home and get strong again. He said, I feel now that you're being discharged, I can tell you something that I've wanted to tell you from the beginning. And I said, what's that? And he leans forward and he says to me, he said, you know, Joel, he said, I've worked with a surgeon for 20 years. He said, we have never, ever had a case like yours. Never. Okay, that it's been so complex and that there's been so many complications one after the next. He said, if you were anyone else, you would probably be dead by now. Those were his words to me. Do you know, Steve, they were the most encouraging words. You know why? Pretty damn hard to kill me. So what I'm saying is, tongue in cheek, okay, those words didn't disturb me at all. Those words encouraged me. It was amazing that a doctor, right, a medical practitioner who has seen multitudes of, traumatic scenarios, right, turned around to me and said, any other person would have been dead by now. That was just so encouraging. It was like, that's amazing. That means, okay, I can't give up because I'm close to success. Even though when I try to stumble back to my room, I still couldn't move my leg, right? But it gave me hope. And that's what I'm hoping this conversation can do for a lot of people out there. Don't give up. Don't give up. It's not worth it, because as human beings, we need to be resilient, right? We need to know that with bad days, there are good days, and with good days, there are bad days. But it is incumbent upon us, right, to not give up. And, you've asked me, I'm preempting your next question, and you're going to ask me for some words of wisdom, and well, I don't know how wise I am, but what I can say is this, okay, is if you're a back pain patient, right, seek out professional advice. Don't try self-diagnose yourself with Dr. Internet. It's not a good place to go, because it really can cause some negative psychological issues, right? Because you read every horror story in there. So, Steve, if I need an electrician, I'm sure as hell not going to get onto to the internet and try to work out how to fix my electrical box. I'll probably, the whole place will explode, right? Pay or seek out professional advice where you can get an objective opinion, and then you can be put on the right path in looking after yourself. Because the goal, and I speak here for Stu McGill and what he's taught me and everything else, our goal is to give self-efficacy to people, to give them the ability to look after themselves, okay? But to have that, you need to be given the right tools. You need to be spoken to in the correct manner. And, don't just get onto some social media page where people say the 5 best exercises for back pain. I'm like, come on, that's infant school, all right? But really seek out a professional. And I'd probably end off by saying this, one of the sayings that always helps me in achieving whatever I need to achieve on a day-to-day basis comes from the great philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, we all wish to be settled. It's only as far as we are unsettled is there any hope for us. And that's what I have to say.
Joel, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. I think every time, whether it's we've spoken on the podcast, whether it's the phone calls that we've had, from a knowledge base in terms of actual exercises and physiology and anatomy, I learn from you. In terms of from a mindset and a coaching and how we speak to people, I learn a lot. I learn a lot from there. Thanks a lot for sharing your story. On that, I think it's from everything that we've said, especially the last two episodes that we've chatted and published on how to prevent prevent lower back pain and work with it, to actually then have your experience there of the surgeries, the end of the line, if you like, and then how that's influenced your coaching and your mindset going forward is absolutely awesome. For everyone listening who might have any questions about what we've spoken today, or want to see, or maybe even reach and get in contact with you in terms of dealing with their lower back pain, where can people find you and reach out to you?
Steve, very easy. Just you get onto my website, which is performancerx.co.uk. We've got a contact form there. I know a lot of people direct message me on Instagram. I try my hardest to reply to them, but there's just so many forms of communication these days. My head can't I'm a bit older than you. My head can't work with those things. But the easiest way is just to contact us at Performance RX, and I'm more than happy. I always speak to people. I never charge in having an initial conversation, telephone conversation with people, to determine if I can help them or if I need to direct them to some other professional. I can't do everything for everyone, but that's the easiest way to contact me, and I'm more than happy to have a chat.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Joel, for taking the time to chat with me today. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.